They thought they were sending a message to the galaxy about human weakness. Instead, they awakened something that had been sleeping in the dark corners of human space for centuries. The Zelkari Empire ruled over 847 star systems with an iron fist, their purple banners marking conquered worlds across 3 galactic arms. For 2,000 years, no species had successfully resisted their expansion. They had crushed the crystal cities of Vorthak Prime, turned the ocean worlds of the Mertai into boiling graveyards, and ground the proud warrior clans of Kaloros into dust beneath their war machines. But humans were different. Humans were stubborn. When Earth refused to surrender after the first bombardment, the Zelkari Empress Vexandra made a decision that would haunt her dying empire forever. She would broadcast the execution of 10 billion humans across every civilized world in the galaxy. A lesson in absolute power. A demonstration of what happened to those who defied the Purple Throne. She had no idea that scattered across the void, in hidden bunkers and forgotten research stations, human scientists had been preparing for this day since first contact went wrong. She didn't know about the black sites. She'd never heard of Project Prometheus. And she certainly didn't understand what humans could become when they stopped playing by civilized rules. The Zelkari Empire made one fatal mistake that day. They gave humanity nothing left to lose. This is the story of how the galaxy's apex predators learned that they had been hunting in the wrong forest all along. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching her home world die on the main screen. Earth hung like a blue marble against the black void, but now purple energy beams carved through its atmosphere like surgical knives. Each beam found a major population center with deadly precision. New York, gone in a flash of purple light. Tokyo, vaporized in seconds. London, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Lagos, Sydney. One by one, the great cities of humanity disappeared in brilliant explosions that painted the night sky in false dawn colors. Admiral, we're receiving the Zelkari broadcast signal, Communications Officer Rodriguez said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. They're streaming this across every inhabited system in the galaxy. Chen's jaw tightened. She'd known this was coming. The Zelkari Empire had sent their ultimatum 3 days ago. Complete surrender or face educational destruction. The human government had tried to negotiate. They'd offered tribute, trade agreements, even voluntary integration into the Empire as a client species. The Zelkari response had been simple: surrender or die. Humanity chose option 3. Put it on screen, Chen ordered. The display shifted to show Empress Vexandra seated on her crystalline throne aboard the massive flagship Dominion's Edge. The Zelkari ruler was a towering figure even by her species standards, nearly 12 feet tall, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. Her 6 arms moved in graceful arcs as she spoke, her voice carrying the cold authority of absolute power. Citizens of the galaxy, Vexandra began, her words translated instantly by the universal communication protocols. You witness today the fate of those who defy the righteous rule of the Zelkari Empire. The species called humans have rejected our generous offer of peaceful integration. They have chosen violence over wisdom, death over subjugation. On the split screen, another bombardment wave struck Earth. The European continent blazed with purple fire. Let this serve as education for all who would resist the natural order, the Empress continued. The strong rule. The weak serve. Those who forget this truth will share the human's fate. Admiral Chen felt something cold and dark unfurling in her chest as she watched her species' homeworld burn. Around her, the bridge crew stood in stunned silence. These were professional military officers who had seen combat, who understood the realities of war. But this wasn't war. This was extermination broadcast as entertainment. Admiral, whispered Lieutenant Commander Park, her tactical officer. We should do something. Chen almost laughed, but it would have come out as a sob. Do something? The Defiance was a heavy cruiser, one of humanity's most powerful warships. Against the Zelkari fleet currently orbiting Earth, it would last approximately 37 seconds. The mathematics of destruction were simple and brutal. The Zelkari had arrived with 800 ships. Humanity's entire remaining fleet numbered 93 vessels, scattered across 12 systems. Even if every human ship converged on Earth simultaneously, They would be outnumbered nearly 10-1 by an enemy whose technology was centuries ahead of their own. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out. "I'm picking up a transmission from Earth. It's on our emergency frequency. Highly encrypted." Chen's heart lurched. "Put it through." The static-filled voice that emerged from the speakers belonged to General Marcus Webb, head of the Unified Earth Defense Command. Chen had known Webb for 15 years. She'd never heard his voice shake before. "This is General Webb broadcasting from UEDC Deep Command. If you're receiving this signal, then the surface bombardment has begun." A pause filled with the sound of distant explosions. "Earth Command is gone. The government is gone. The surface installations are gone. As of right now, I'm ordering the activation of Protocol 7. Chen felt the blood drain from her face. Protocol 7 was a myth. A ghost story told in late-night officer clubs. The idea that humanity had been preparing for total war since first contact was the kind of paranoid fantasy that career military officers joked about, but never seriously considered. Except Webb's next words proved it wasn't a fantasy at all. "All Black Site commanders, this is your authorization to begin Phase 1 operations. Repeat, Operation Prometheus is go. Admiral Chun, if you're out there, proceed immediately to coordinates Tango 77 Alpha. You'll find what you're looking for in the asteroid field. Authorization code, Pandora's box, is open." The transmission cut to static. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. The coordinates Webb had transmitted were in the Kepler 442 system, 4 days away at maximum burn. Chen had been to that system once, years ago, during a routine patrol. Nothing there but rocks and ice. "Admiral," Park asked quietly. Chen stared at the screen showing Earth's continued destruction. The death toll was climbing past 8 billion now. In another hour, her species' homeworld would be a scorched rock orbiting a star that would remember the light of human cities for exactly as long as it took that light to fade into the cosmic background radiation. But Protocol 7 was real, which meant other things might be real too. Dark rumors about human research programs that had gone beyond ethical boundaries. Whispered stories about weapons that should never be built. The kind of projects that civilized species avoided because some lines should never be crossed. Apparently, humanity had been crossing those lines for decades. "Set course for Kepler 442, Chun ordered. "Maximum burn." "And Rodriguez?" "Yes, ma'am. Send this message to all human ships on the emergency frequency. The children are in the basement. Follow Mother home. They'll understand." As the Defiance turned away from Earth's dying light, Chen made herself watch the Zelkari broadcast to its conclusion. She watched Empress Vexandra gloat over the ashes of human civilization. She memorized every word of the alien ruler's victory speech. She burned every image of Earth's destruction into her memory with crystalline clarity. 10 billion humans had died today. The Zelkari thought they had won a war. They were about to learn the difference between winning a battle and surviving the aftermath. 3 days later, the Defiance reached the coordinates Webb had transmitted. The asteroid field looked exactly as Chun remembered it, a sparse collection of rock and ice tumbling through the void around a dim red star. Long-range sensors showed nothing artificial. No energy signatures. No signs of human presence. "Ma'am, I'm not detecting anything," Park reported. "Just standard asteroid composition. Iron, silicon, some water ice." Chen checked the coordinates again. They were exactly where Webb had directed them. She was about to order a more detailed scan when her communications officer suddenly straightened. "Admiral, I'm receiving a signal. It's coming from inside one of the asteroids." On screen, the face that appeared belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez, former head of the Titan Research Collective. Chen had thought Vasquez was dead. The woman had disappeared 5 years ago during a classified research mission. "Admiral Chun," Vasquez said, her image flickering with transmission static. "Welcome to Black Site Prometheus. We've been waiting for this day, though I'd hoped it would never come." Her expression was grim. "Dock with asteroid TK 7749. The bay will open when you transmit authorization code Icarus 9. The signal cut. Chen stared at the asteroid in question. From the outside, it looked like any other chunk of rock. But, as the Defiance approached and transmitted the authorization code, a section of the asteroid's surface simply disappeared. Beneath lay a docking bay large enough to accommodate a heavy cruiser. Jesus Christ, Park whispered. How long has this been here? 37 years, Dr. Vasquez answered as she met them at the airlock. She looked older than Chun remembered, her black hair now streaked with silver. But her eyes held a fierce intensity that made Chun take an involuntary step backward. We started building the black sites the day after first contact. Some of us believed this war was inevitable. She led them through corridors carved into living rock. The facility extended much deeper into the asteroid than should have been possible. Gravity plates kept their feet firmly on the deck, while bioluminescent panels provided soft, steady illumination. What is this place? Chen asked. Insurance, Vasquez replied. When the politicians were trying to negotiate with the Zelkari, we were preparing for the possibility that negotiation would fail. We established 17 black sites across human space. Prometheus is the largest. They entered a vast chamber that took Chen's breath away. The space was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Row upon row of sealed pods lined the floor, each one the size of a shipping container. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. What's in the pods? Chen asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want the answer. Vasquez's smile was sharp as a blade. The future of warfare, Admiral. We've spent 40 years studying every species the Zelkari conquered. We've analyzed their biology, their psychology, their weaknesses. And we've built weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. She gestured to the nearest pod. Through its transparent aluminum window, Chen could see something that looked like a metallic spider the size of a small dog. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Nanophage swarms, Vasquez explained. Designed to target Zelkari neural tissue specifically. One unit can replicate itself 1,000,000 times using the silicon in their blood. It spreads through touch contact. Chen felt sick. That's a war crime. War crimes are for species that follow the rules of war, Vasquez replied coldly. The Zelkari just broadcast the execution of 10 billion humans for entertainment. They made the rules. We're just playing by them now. She moved to the next pod. Inside was what looked like a crystalline flower, beautiful and delicate. Psionic resonance bombs. The Zelkari communicate through telepathic networks. This little beauty can overload their entire collective consciousness from up to 50 light-years away. One deployment could lobotomize every Zelkari in a star system. Pod after pod revealed increasingly horrifying weapons. Viral agents that would turn Zelkari biology against itself. Quantum parasites that could infect their ship computers through subspace communications. Temporal grenades that would trap enemy vessels in causality loops until their crews died of old age. How many ships do you have here? Chen asked. 17 automated dreadnoughts, Vasquez replied. Each one equipped with prototype weapons that have never been tested in combat. But, Admiral, we're not planning to fight a conventional war. We're planning to commit genocide. Chen stopped walking. Genocide. Complete extinction of the Zelkari species, Vasquez confirmed. Every man, woman, and child in their empire. Every Zelkari colony world. Every ship. Every outpost. We're going to end them so thoroughly that in 1,000 years, the only evidence they ever existed will be the ruins of the worlds they conquered. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Chun felt the moral foundations of her worldview cracking under the weight of what she was hearing. The other black sites have different specializations, Vasquez continued. Biological weapons. Reality manipulation technology. Weapons that attack the quantum foundations of matter itself. In 6 months, we'll be ready to begin Operation Alien Extinction. Chen found her voice. And if I refuse to be part of this? Vasquez's expression softened slightly. Then, you dock your ship and wait for the war to end. But, Admiral, they killed our world. They murdered our families for sport and broadcast it across the galaxy as a lesson in submission. We're not the aggressors anymore. We're the antibodies. That night, alone in the quarters Vasquez had assigned her, Chen stared out at the stars through the asteroid's camouflaged viewing port. Earth was invisible from here, just another point of light in an ocean of darkness. But she knew it was still there, still burning, still dying. She thought about her daughter Rebecca, who had been visiting colleges in California when the bombardment began. She thought about her ex-husband David, who had been working late at his laboratory in Geneva. She thought about her parents, retired and living quietly in a small town in Iowa. They were all gone now, vaporized in the first wave of purple fire. Chen closed her eyes and made her choice. When she opened them again, her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman she barely recognized. Someone harder. Someone who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Rodriguez, she said into her comm unit. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them Admiral Chun is staying to oversee black site operations. And send this to all human vessels. The children are coming home. Mother has work to do. The war for human survival was about to become something much darker. Something the galaxy had never seen before. 6 weeks after Earth's destruction, the galaxy began to whisper about strange disappearances in Zelkari space. It started small. A single patrol ship failed to report in from the Vega system. Search and rescue found the vessel drifting dead in space, its crew missing. No signs of battle damage. No distress signals. The ship's logs showed normal operations until 14 hours 27 minutes and 33 seconds, when all recording suddenly stopped. The Zelkari military classified it as a technical malfunction and ordered increased patrols. 3 days later, an entire supply convoy vanished between the Proxima and Wolf systems. 12 ships, including 2 destroyers. Again, no wreckage, no distress calls. They were there one moment, gone the next, leaving only empty space where their transponder signals had been. Empress Vexandra received the reports in her private chambers aboard the Dominion's Edge. The massive flagship had remained in Earth's orbit, feeding on the planet's dying energy fields to power its reality engines. The scorched world below still glowed with residual heat from the bombardment, a monument to Zelkari supremacy. Minor technical failures, Admiral Kethvar assured her. The conquered systems are vast. Equipment malfunctions are inevitable. Vexandra studied the tactical display with her 6 eyes. Each orb could perceive different electromagnetic spectrums, giving her a complete picture of local space. What she saw troubled her. The disappearances weren't random. They formed a pattern, a slow spiral moving inward toward the Empire's core systems. Double the patrols, she commanded. I want constant surveillance on all shipping lanes. What the Empress didn't know was that her orders were already too late. 47 light-years away, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Black Site Prometheus, watching real-time intelligence feeds from across Zelkari space. The information came from sources the aliens could never detect: quantum-entangled spy drones that existed in parallel dimensions, parasitic programs hiding in subspace communication networks, and human agents who had been surgically modified to appear Zelkari. Phase 1 deployment is complete, reported Commander Singh, Vasquez's military liaison. 17 nanophage swarms are now active in enemy territory. Infection rates are exceeding projections. Vasquez nodded, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. The nanophages were designed to be perfect killers. They could survive in vacuum for decades, replicate using any silicon-based material, and target specific genetic markers with surgical precision. Once released, they would spread through the Zelkari population like wildfire, dormant until activated by a specific quantum frequency. What about the other sites? Black Site Cerberus has successfully deployed their psychological warfare package. Zelkari crews are beginning to report hallucinations, paranoia, and communication breakdowns. Black Site Medusa's viral weapons are spreading through their biological infrastructure. And Black Site Tartarus. Singh paused. Tartarus has begun testing the reality bombs. Vasquez felt a chill despite herself. The reality bombs were perhaps the most horrifying weapon in humanity's arsenal. They didn't just kill their targets, they edited them out of existence entirely, rewriting local space-time to ensure they had never been there at all. The weapon violated so many fundamental principles of physics that using it risked damaging the structure of reality itself. But the Zelkari had killed 10 billion humans. Some risks were acceptable. Admiral Chen's fleet is ready? Vasquez asked. Ready and waiting. 17 dreadnoughts, each equipped with a full complement of prototype weapons, plus the Defiance and the other human vessels that have joined us. Singh's expression grew grim. Ma'am, some of the crew are having second thoughts. What we're planning is necessary, Vasquez finished. The Zelkari don't understand mercy, Commander. They understand only power and fear. We're going to teach them both. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place in hidden facilities that officially didn't exist. Black Site Cerberus, built inside a hollowed-out moon, buzzed with activity as technicians prepared weapons that attacked the mind rather than the body. Psionic scramblers that would turn Zelkari telepathy against them. Fear generators that could drive entire populations insane. Memory viruses that would make them forget how to operate their own technology. Black Site Medusa, concealed within a rogue planet drifting between systems, focused on biological warfare. The Zelkari were silicon-based life forms, but they still had biological components. Organic neural networks. Carbon-based support structures. The scientists at Medusa had spent decades learning how to make those systems fail in the most agonizing ways possible. Black Site Tartarus was different. Built in a pocket dimension that existed parallel to normal space, it housed weapons that shouldn't exist. Temporal assassins that could kill targets in the past. Quantum plagues that spread through parallel universes. Causality bombs that could prevent enemy civilizations from ever evolving in the first place. Dr. Marcus Webb had escaped Earth's destruction by pure chance. He'd been visiting Tartarus when the bombardment began, trapped in dimensional space while his homeworld burned. Now he stood in Tartarus's main laboratory, watching his team make final preparations for weapons that could end the war in minutes. "Sir," called Dr. Kim, his chief physicist, "the temporal displacement array is ready. We can target the Zelkari homeworld's past, prevent their species from developing spaceflight." Webb considered this. Temporal warfare was the ultimate violation of causality. Preventing the Zelkari from achieving spaceflight would save countless lives across the galaxy. But it would also create a paradox. Without the Zelkari threat, humanity would never have developed these weapons in the first place. Not yet, Webb decided. We use conventional weapons first. Temporal intervention is our last resort. Conventional? Dr. Kim looked at the reality bombs they'd been preparing. "Sir, these weapons rewrite the fundamental constants of physics. I'm not sure anything we're doing counts as conventional anymore." Webb didn't answer. He was watching a display showing Earth's current state. The planet was still burning, its atmosphere poisoned with radioactive debris. The Zelkari had left it alive just enough to serve as a warning to other species, a monument to their power. Humanity would return that favor with interest. Meanwhile, Admiral Chun had transformed the Defiance into something unrecognizable. Her crew had been augmented with experimental technology that pushed human physiology beyond its normal limits. Neural interfaces that let them operate weapons systems with thought alone. Genetic modifications that allowed them to survive in environments that would kill unmodified humans. Combat drugs that enhanced reaction time, strength, and aggression while suppressing fear and moral inhibitions. They weren't entirely human anymore. But then, humanity as it had existed was gone. What emerged from the ashes would be something new, something harder, something that could match the Zelkari's cruelty and exceed it. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Park, her cybernetic implants glowing softly in the dim bridge lighting. Long-range sensors detect a Zelkari battle group approaching the Kepler system. 3 heavy cruisers and an escort squadron. Chin smiled, feeling the combat stims surge through her enhanced nervous system. "Perfect. Let's give them a demonstration." The Zelkari commander, Admiral Thexanael, had come to investigate the strange energy readings detected in this remote system. His sensors showed only empty space and a few worthless asteroids, but something was wrong. The quantum resonance patterns were unlike anything in Imperial databases. "Admiral," reported his science officer, "I'm detecting 17 large objects decloaking at the edge of the system. Configuration unknown. They appear to be warships." Thexanael studied the tactical display through his 6 eyes. The unknown vessels were sleek and predatory, their hulls seeming to absorb rather than reflect his sensor beams. Their design was alien, aggressive, built for violence rather than the elegant beauty preferred by Zelkari aesthetics. "Broadcast on all frequencies," he commanded. "This system is under Imperial protection. Identify yourselves immediately." The response came not through communication channels, but as a direct neural intrusion that bypassed his ship's shields and firewalls entirely. The alien voice spoke inside his mind, cold and implacable. "We are humanity," the voice said. We are what you made us. And we are here to collect the debt you owe. Thexanael felt fear for the first time in decades. Humans were extinct. Earth was ash. The survivors had fled to the outer systems where they would eventually be hunted down and eliminated. These ships couldn't be human. It was impossible. Open fire, he ordered. Destroy them all. The Zelkari battle group unleashed the fury of an empire that had conquered 800 systems. Purple energy beams lashed across space, each one capable of vaporizing a human city. Graviton missiles that could crack planets. Reality distortion fields that turned local space into a maze of twisted physics. The human fleet didn't even try to dodge. The weapons struck their hulls and simply stopped. Energy beams dissipated against armor that seemed to drink light itself. Missiles exploded harmlessly against shields that operated on principles Zelkari science couldn't explain. The reality distortion fields actually made the human ships stronger, feeding energy into their incomprehensible weapon systems. Impossible, Thexanael whispered. Admiral Chen's response came through the same neural channel, her voice carrying a weight of grief transformed into fury that made the Zelkari admiral's consciousness recoil. You broadcast our death for entertainment, she said. You turned genocide into a spectacle. Now let us show you what humans learned during the years you thought we were busy being civilized. The first human weapon to fire was something Chen's crew called a probability cannon. It didn't shoot projectiles or energy beams. Instead, it altered local reality to ensure that its target would suffer a catastrophic failure. The mathematics of destruction made inevitable. Thexanael watched in horror as his flagship's main reactor simply decided to explode for no reason at all. Safety systems that had functioned perfectly for centuries suddenly forgot how to contain antimatter. Hull plating that had withstood the fires of stellar cores developed fatal flaws that had somehow always existed. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, purple fire blooming against the stars like a deadly flower. The second weapon was worse. It attacked the crew rather than the ships, reaching through quantum space to touch the minds of every Zelkari in the battle group simultaneously. They experienced, in perfect clarity, the deaths of every human who had died during Earth's bombardment. 10 billion deaths, compressed into a single moment of absolute suffering. Half the Zelkari fleet went insane instantly. The survivors found themselves paralyzed by an empathy they had never possessed, suddenly, understanding the magnitude of what their empire had done. They felt every murdered child, every vaporized family, every dream that had died in purple fire. The third weapon was the cruelest. It was a temporal loop that trapped the surviving Zelkari vessels in the last 30 seconds before their deaths, forcing them to experience their destruction over and over again in an endless cycle of terror and pain. They would die knowing exactly how they would die, helpless to change it, for what subjectively felt like eternity. When the battle ended, 17 Zelkari ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of ionized gas. No survivors, no escape pods, no final messages home. They had simply ceased to exist, as if the universe itself had decided they no longer deserved to be real. Admiral Chen felt nothing as she watched the enemy die. The combat drugs had suppressed her capacity for mercy along with her fear. What remained was purpose, refined to its purest form. Send a message to all black sites, she commanded. Phase 2 is authorized. Begin full deployment. Across human space, hidden facilities that had waited decades for this moment burst into activity. Automated factories began mass-producing weapons that violated the fundamental laws of nature. Cloning facilities activated genetic templates for soldiers who had been designed to feel no pain, no fear, and no remorse. Research stations conducted final tests on technologies that would have been considered impossible by civilized science. The Zelkari Empire had ruled the galaxy through fear and superior firepower. They were about to learn that humans had spent 40 years preparing to be the superior monsters. Empress Vexandra received news of Thexanael's fate 3 days later. The destruction of an entire battle group was unprecedented in Imperial history. No species had ever successfully resisted a Zelkari military force once battle was joined. She immediately dispatched her personal investigation fleet to the Kepler system. What they found there defied comprehension. The asteroids that had once hidden black site Prometheus were gone. In their place was a structure that hurt to look at directly. A space station built from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its geometry was non-Euclidean, its surface covered in equations that seemed to rewrite themselves as observers watched. More disturbing were the messages carved into local space-time itself, written in quantum fluctuations that would persist until the heat death of the universe. You wanted to teach the galaxy about power. Class is now in session. Every death will be answered. Every crime will be repaid. We are no longer bound by the rules of civilized warfare. You made us into something new. And, finally, most chilling of all, this was just a demonstration. Wait until you see what we built while you thought we were extinct. The investigation fleet retreated without firing a shot. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Zelkari Empire had encountered something that made them afraid. That fear would soon become terror as humanity's true war machine began to move. The gloves were off. The mask had fallen. And the monsters Earth had hidden in its deepest shadows were finally coming out to play. Dr. Vasquez stood in her enhanced command center, watching real-time feeds from across the galaxy. The nanophage swarms were spreading faster than projected. Zelkari biology was proving even more vulnerable to human weapons than their models had predicted. "Ma'am," Singh reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from 14 Zelkari client species. They're offering to switch sides." Vasquez considered this. The client species weren't responsible for Earth's destruction. Many had been conquered against their will, forced to serve an empire they hated. Accepting their surrender would be the merciful choice. "Decline all offers," she said coldly. "We're not accepting surrenders. We're not taking prisoners. We're not showing mercy. The Zelkari built their empire on genocide and terror. We're going to end it the same way." Singh looked troubled. "Ma'am, some of these species are completely innocent. They had no choice but to serve the empire." "The children burning on Earth were innocent too," Vasquez replied. "Innocence is a luxury we can no longer afford, Commander. Send word to all black sites. Operation Alien Extinction proceeds as planned. No exceptions. No mercy. No survivors." The transformation was complete. Humanity had officially become the thing they had once fought against. But, as Vasquez watched the tactical displays showing human weapons spreading across Zelkari space like a cancer, she felt no regret. The monsters had chosen their victims poorly. Now it was time for the victims to choose how the monsters would die. The Zelkari homeworld of Vorthdal had stood unconquered for 3,000 years. Its crystalline cities stretched across 7 continents, each spire a monument to imperial glory. The planet's orbital defense grid could stop the combined fleets of 50 systems. Its ground-based weapons could crack moons. Its shield generators could turn the entire world intangible for days at a time. None of that mattered anymore. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, now called the Prometheus Rising, watching the homeworld of humanity's executioners burn. The ship itself had been transformed beyond recognition. Where once it had been merely a heavy cruiser, it was now something that existed partially outside normal space-time. Its hull was alive, grown from organic metal that could repair itself and adapt to any threat. Its weapons didn't fire projectiles, they fired concepts. Ideas that reality had no choice but to accept. "Orbital defense grid is down," reported Lieutenant Park, her consciousness now distributed across 17 parallel processing cores. "Planetary shields are fluctuating. The nanophage swarms have reached critical saturation in the northern hemisphere." Chen watched the tactical display with eyes that could perceive 11 dimensions simultaneously. The Zelkari homeworld was dying slowly, deliberately. This wasn't the quick annihilation Earth had suffered. This was surgery performed with cruelty as the anesthetic. "Begin Phase 3 deployment," she commanded. Across the Prometheus Rising, weapon systems that had never existed in any sane universe prepared to fire. The Guilt engine powered up, its reality-warping coils beginning to sing with harmonics that made space itself weep. The memory plague achieved critical resonance, ready to infect every Zelkari mind with the dying thoughts of their victims. The causality bombs armed themselves, their temporal cores spinning faster than time itself. Below on Vorthdal, Empress Vexendra stood in her throne room deep beneath the capital city's foundations. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with trophies from 800 conquered worlds. Statues from Kaloros, crystal formations from the Vorthak ruins, preserved organs from species that no longer had names. But now those trophies seemed to mock her. Each one represented a victory that felt hollow in the face of humanity's impossible revenge. How could an extinct species be systematically destroying the greatest empire in galactic history? Report, she commanded, her 6 arms gesturing with imperial authority even as her realm crumbled around her. Admiral Kethvar's image flickered on the communication screen, transmitted from his flagship in high orbit. His silver skin had taken on a sickly pallor, and his usual confidence had evaporated. Your Majesty, the human weapons they're not following any known principles of warfare. Our ships aren't just being destroyed, they're being edited out of existence. Entire battle fleets are forgetting they were ever built. Crews are spontaneously developing empathy for their victims and committing mass suicide. Reality itself seems to be turning against us. Vexandra's primary eyes narrowed. Impossible. Reality doesn't take sides. With respect, Your Majesty, the humans appear to have made it take sides. They're not fighting us with technology. They're fighting us with philosophy, with concepts that remake the universe according to their will. On the surface above, the first memory plague missiles struck Vorthdal's major population centers. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were condensed experiences, crystallized trauma that infected consciousness itself. Every Zelkari touched by their influence suddenly experienced the death of Earth from a human perspective. In perfect, agonizing detail, they felt what it was like to watch their families vaporize. They experienced the helplessness of seeing their children burned alive for entertainment. They understood, for the first time in their species' history, what their empire had actually been doing for 2 millennia. The psychological impact was devastating. Across the homeworld, Zelkari citizens began to understand that they weren't heroes in their own story, they were the monsters. The realization shattered minds that had been conditioned for 3,000 years to see conquest as righteousness. Mass suicides began within hours, not from despair, but from a guilt so profound that continued existence became unbearable. The Zelkari had never developed mechanisms for processing shame because they had never believed they could be wrong. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the homeworld's collapse from her command center, now relocated to a space station that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Her body had been extensively modified for this war. Her brain now operated at quantum processing speeds. Her nervous system had been rewired to interface directly with reality manipulation technology. She was no longer entirely human, but then, humanity itself was no longer entirely human. Psychological warfare phase is proceeding optimally, reported her enhanced tactical AI. Zelkari morale has collapsed across their core systems. Suicide rates are approaching 50% in major population centers. Vasquez felt nothing watching an entire civilization destroy itself. The grief she'd once felt for her destroyed species had been surgically removed, replaced with purpose so pure it burned like stellar fire. She was become death, destroyer of worlds. And she was very good at her job. Begin deployment of the extinction protocols, she commanded. The extinction protocols were humanity's final solution. Not just weapons, but fundamental rewrites of physical law designed to make the continued existence of Zelkari biology impossible. They would alter the electromagnetic spectrum to make Zelkari neural tissue non-functional. They would modify quantum mechanics to prevent silicon-based consciousness from forming coherent thoughts. They would edit the periodic table to ensure that the specific combination of elements that comprised Zelkari DNA could never again arrange itself into living patterns. It was genocide on a cosmological scale, the complete erasure of a species from the possible futures of the universe. Back on Vorthdal, Empress Vexandra felt the weight of absolute defeat settling on her shoulders. Her empire was collapsing faster than information could travel between systems. Entire star sectors had gone dark. Client species were declaring independence, or, worse, joining the humans in their crusade of vengeance. The military she had spent millennia building was dissolving like ice in a stellar furnace. She opened a communication channel to the human fleet, not knowing if they would even acknowledge her transmission. "I am Empress Vexandra of the Zelkari Empire," she broadcast on all frequencies. I wish to negotiate terms of surrender." The The response came not through normal communication, but as a direct intrusion into her consciousness. The voice belonged to Admiral Chun, but it carried the weight of 10 billion ghosts. You broadcast our deaths for entertainment, Chin's voice said inside Vexandra's mind. You made our genocide into a lesson for the galaxy. Did you really think we would forget? Did you believe there would be no consequences? Please, Vexandra said, the word foreign in her mouth. We can reach an agreement. Territory, resources, technology transfers. Name your terms. Chin's laughter was the sound of supernovas dying. Our terms are simple, Empress. Complete extinction. Every Zelkari, every world, every memory of your species wiped from galactic history. You wanted to teach the universe about power. Consider this your final exam. Vexandra felt despair crush her spirit with the weight of a collapsing star. You're making us extinct over a single world? Over one species among billions. No, Chin replied, her voice carrying the cold finality of absolute zero. We're making you extinct because you made genocide into entertainment. Because you built an empire on the bones of innocence and called it civilization. Because when you had the chance to show mercy, you chose cruelty instead. The communication cut, leaving Vexandra alone with the sound of her dying world. Above, the human fleet began its final assault. But this wasn't an attack with conventional weapons. This was reality surgery, performed by beings who had learned to rewrite the fundamental rules of existence. The guilt engine fired first, its beam striking the planet's core. Instead of causing physical damage, it infected the very atoms of Vorthdal with the accumulated shame of 3,000 years of imperial crimes. Every molecule of the planet began to experience guilt so profound that it sought to cease existing. The memory plague spread through the quantum foam of local space-time, ensuring that every Zelkari who died would experience the deaths of all their victims in perfect detail. No quick deaths, no merciful endings, only the slow, excruciating understanding of exactly what they had been complicit in creating. The causality bomb struck last, their temporal cores spinning faster than thought itself. They didn't destroy Vorthdal so much as edited out of history. The planet had always been there, and now it had never been there. And somehow both states were simultaneously true. Reality whimpered and began to develop stress fractures around the paradox. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in system after system. Human fleets emerged from hidden dimensions to visit impossible destruction on Zelkari worlds. Not conquest, erasure. The complete and methodical deletion of a galactic empire that had stood for millennia. But the humans weren't just destroying the Zelkari. They were sending a message to every other species in the galaxy. They were demonstrating what happened when you pushed humanity past the point of civilized restraint. Dr. Marcus Webb watched from Black Site Tartarus as the temporal kill systems did their work. Reality was becoming unstable in 17 star systems simultaneously. The space-time continuum was developing cancer where human weapons had violated too many fundamental laws. But it was working. The Zelkari Empire was dying, and nothing in the known universe could stop the process. Sir, reported Dr. Kim, her consciousness now existing as pure information. We're detecting surrender broadcasts from multiple client species. They're offering complete capitulation, technology transfers, whatever we want. Webb considered this. The client species were innocent of Earth's destruction. Many had been conquered against their will, forced to serve masters they despised. Accepting their surrender would be the rational choice. The moral choice. Decline all offers, he decided. Broadcast this message on all frequencies. The Zelkari Empire dies today. Anyone who stands with them dies tomorrow. Anyone who served them will be judged by the ghosts of their victims. There are no innocent hands in a machine built for genocide. The transformation was complete. Humanity had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that could match the universe's cruelty and exceed it. They had learned to fight horror with horror, atrocity with atrocity. And they were winning. But victory was coming at a cost that wouldn't be fully understood until the shooting stopped. In remaking themselves into perfect killers, humanity had lost something essential. They had become as monstrous as their enemies, perhaps more so. The difference was that they knew it. They understood exactly what they had sacrificed for vengeance. And they had made the choice consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of what they were becoming. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans were capable of when pushed beyond endurance. Now it was learning, and the lesson was written in the ashes of burning worlds. As the last Zelkari world died screaming into quantum foam, Admiral Chun felt the weight of 10 billion deaths finally begin to lift from her shoulders. Earth's children could rest now. The debt had been paid in full. But, as she looked at her transformed crew, at the weapons that rewrote reality itself, at the empire they were building from the bones of their enemies, she wondered if the price of vengeance had been worth paying. The monsters were all dead now, but new monsters had taken their place. And these monsters wore human faces. The last Zelkari died on a Tuesday. Admiral Sarah Chun watched from the bridge of the Prometheus rising as the final pocket of resistance vanished into quantum foam. Outpost Station Zirian, a minor mining facility in an unnamed system, had held out for 3 days longer than the rest of their species. Not because they were particularly brave or well-defended, but because they were simply too insignificant for humanity's war machine to notice immediately. Now they were gone. All of them. Every Zelkari in the galaxy had been systematically hunted down and eliminated. Not just killed, erased. Edited out of existence so thoroughly that reality itself had developed amnesia about their species. The war was over. Humanity had won. But, as Chin looked around her bridge, at the crew that had once been human and was now something else entirely, she wondered what exactly they had won. Lieutenant Park's consciousness existed primarily as quantum information now. Her physical body maintained more out of nostalgia than necessity. Her face was a shifting hologram that occasionally forgot what expression it was supposed to wear. "Admiral," she reported, her voice coming from speakers throughout the ship rather than her mouth. "Final casualty reports are coming in from all theaters." Chen waited. She knew the numbers would be enormous. War always demanded blood payment. Zelkari casualties. 847 billion confirmed killed. Unknown billions more edited from temporal existence. 0 survivors detected across all surveyed systems. Park paused. Human casualties. 97,394 combat deaths. 23,847 personnel lost to transformation failures. 156,923 individuals classified as no longer human enough to categorize. Nearly 200,000 humans had died in the war. But millions more had been transformed so completely that they couldn't be considered the same species anymore. The weapons humanity had built required operators who could interface with reality at its most fundamental levels. The process changed people. It changed them so much that many couldn't remember what they had been before. Chen looked at her own hands. They appeared normal, but she knew that was an illusion. Her body existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Her consciousness could process information faster than some computers. She could perceive time as a navigable dimension and space as a suggestion rather than a law. She was more powerful than any human in history. She was also less human than any person who had ever lived. "What about the client species?" she asked. "Mixed results," Park replied. 43 species have declared complete surrender. 17 have gone into hiding. 7 have committed mass suicide rather than face judgment. 3 have successfully fled beyond the galactic rim. Chen nodded. That was better than expected. The client species hadn't asked to serve the Zelkari Empire. Most had been conquered and forced into compliance. Humanity's victory had freed them from thousands of years of oppression. But freedom came with a price. The weapons humans had used to destroy the Zelkari had damaged local spacetime so severely that 17 star systems were now uninhabitable. Reality itself had become unstable, prone to random fluctuations that could turn breathable air into plasma or make gravity flow backward for hours at a time. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized on the bridge in a shower of quantum particles. Her physical form was optional now. She existed primarily as pure thought interfacing with reality manipulation technology. When she chose to appear corporeal, she looked exactly as she had 40 years ago, before the war began. It was a deliberate choice, a reminder of what she had once been. "The cleanup is proceeding," she reported. "All Zelkari technology has been quarantined for disposal. Their ships, their weapons, their entire technological base is being systematically destroyed. We can't risk any of it surviving to threaten future generations. Chen studied her former colleague. Vasquez had been brilliant before the war, one of humanity's leading experts in xenobiology. Now she was something approaching a goddess of death, capable of rewriting the basic laws of physics through will alone. The transformation had been necessary for victory, but the cost was becoming apparent. What about their history? Chen asked. Their art, their culture, their literature? Vasquez's expression didn't change, being systematically deleted from all galactic records. We're editing them out of history as completely as we edited them out of life. In 1,000 years, there will be no evidence the Zelkari Empire ever existed. That's thorough. It's necessary. They built their civilization on genocide. Their art was propaganda for mass murder. Their literature was instruction manuals for oppression. Nothing they created deserves to survive. Vasquez paused. We're not just ending their species. We're ending their ideas, their philosophy, their way of thinking. Complete extinction includes cultural death. Chen felt something twist in her augmented consciousness. She tried to identify the emotion and realized with surprise that it was regret. She hadn't felt regret in months. The combat modifications were supposed to have suppressed such inconvenient feelings. What about us? She asked quietly. Vasquez tilted her head. What do you mean? What happens to humanity now? The war is over. The enemy is extinct. What do we do with weapons that can rewrite reality? What do we do with ourselves? For the first time since Earth's destruction, Vasquez looked uncertain. We rebuild, I suppose. We find new worlds to colonize. We establish a new human civilization based on the lessons we've learned. And what lessons are those? Chen pressed. That genocide is acceptable as long as you call it justice? That any atrocity can be justified if your enemy commits atrocities first? That the best way to fight monsters is to become something worse? Vasquez's form flickered, her control over her manifestation wavering. They killed 10 billion humans for entertainment. They broadcast our deaths across the galaxy as a lesson in submission. Everything we did was justified. Was it? Chen looked out at the stars, each one now marked by the radiation signatures of human superweapons. We didn't just kill the Zelkari. We tortured them. We made them experience the deaths of their victims before we allowed them to die. We infected them with guilt so profound that they begged for extinction. We turned their own existence into a punishment worse than hell. They deserved it. Maybe they did. But what does that make us? Before Vasquez could answer, alerts began sounding throughout the bridge. Long-range sensors were detecting something impossible, ships approaching from beyond the galactic rim. The energy signatures were unlike anything in human databases. Admiral, Park reported, her voice tight with concern. We're receiving a transmission. It's from the cosmic hierarchy. Chen felt ice form in her augmented bloodstream. The cosmic hierarchy was a myth, a legend whispered in the deepest corners of galactic civilization. They were supposedly the oldest species in the universe, the first to achieve technological transcendence. If they existed at all, they were beings of such advanced development that they might as well be gods. Put it through, Chen ordered. The being that appeared on the main screen was beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive directly. Its form seemed to shift between dimensions, showing different aspects of itself to each observer. When it spoke, the words bypassed the universal translator and spoke directly to the consciousness of everyone listening. I am Speaker Eternal Dawn over endless peaks of the first civilization, the being said. We have observed your war with the Zelkari Empire. We have seen your methods. We have judged your actions. Chen felt every modification, every enhancement, every weapon system on her ship suddenly go dormant. Not disabled, simply ignored by reality itself. The hierarchy being had somehow made their entire war fleet irrelevant with a thought. You have committed acts that violate the fundamental principles of civilized behavior, the speaker continued. You have tortured entire populations. You have engaged in cultural genocide. You have damaged the basic structure of space-time through your use of prohibited weapons technologies. They started it, Vasquez said, her voice carrying desperate defiance. They killed our world. They murdered 10 billion innocents for sport. The speaker's attention turned to her, and Vasquez screamed, not from physical pain, but from suddenly understanding the true magnitude of what she had become. The being's gaze was like looking into a mirror that showed not your reflection, but your soul. Yes, the speaker agreed. The Zelkari committed unforgivable crimes. Their empire was built on suffering, maintained through oppression, and sustained by genocide. They deserved to be stopped. Chun felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the hierarchy understood. Maybe they would approve of humanity's actions. But you did not simply stop them, the speaker continued. You became them. You embraced their methods, their philosophy, their complete disregard for the value of life. In destroying the monsters, you became monsters yourselves. We had no choice, Chun protested. They were too powerful. We had to use everything we had. There are always choices. You could have fought them conventionally and accepted defeat with honor. You could have found allies among the client species and built a coalition of resistance. You could have sought diplomatic solutions, even in the face of their aggression. The speaker's form rippled with something that might have been sadness. Instead, you chose to match atrocity with atrocity, horror with horror, genocide with genocide. Chun felt the weight of judgment settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. So what happens now? Do you destroy us too? The speaker was silent for a long moment. When it finally responded, its voice carried the weight of cosmic authority. The cosmic hierarchy does not engage in punitive extinction. We are gardeners, not executioners. But neither can we allow your methods to spread to other species. Civilization itself would collapse if every war became an exercise in mutual annihilation. Then what? Vasquez demanded. Quarantine, the speaker replied. Humanity will be confined to a single system. Your weapons will be deactivated. Your modifications will be reversed where possible. You will be given the chance to rediscover what it means to be human rather than monsters wearing human shapes. Chun felt the ship's systems beginning to shut down around her. Not damaged or destroyed, but simply turned off. The reality manipulation technology that had made her more than human was becoming inert. The quantum processing arrays that had let her perceive 11 dimensions were going dark. And if we refuse, she asked, then you will join the Zelkari in extinction, the speaker said simply. We offer redemption, but we will not permit the continued existence of species that threaten the stability of civilization itself. Choose quickly. This offer will not be repeated. Chun looked around her bridge, at the crew that had followed her through hell and beyond. They were killers now, monsters that had been forged in the fires of righteous vengeance. But underneath all the modifications and enhancements, somewhere deep in their quantum-expanded consciousness, they were still human. Or they could be again, if they chose to remember. We accept, she said quietly. The transformation began immediately. Chun felt her augmented senses dimming, her expanded consciousness contracting back to merely human limits. Around her, the crew was undergoing the same process. Weapons that could rewrite reality were becoming inert metal and crystal. Ships that existed in 17 dimensions were collapsing back into normal space. They were becoming human again. It should have felt like diminishment. Instead, it felt like coming home. Dr. Marcus Webb materialized on the bridge as the quarantine field established itself around human space. He looked older, more tired than Chun had ever seen him. The weight of what they had done was finally catching up with all of them. So this is how it ends, he said. Not with conquest or glory, but with cosmic house arrest. Maybe, Chun replied. Or maybe this is where it begins. We have a chance to build something better this time. Something that isn't founded on revenge and hatred. Webb looked skeptical. After what we've done, after what we've become, how do we come back from genocide? Chun didn't have an answer for that. But as she felt her humanity slowly returning, as the modifications that had made her into a weapon of mass destruction faded away, she felt something else returning too. Hope. One day at a time, she said finally. One choice at a time. We remember what we were, and we decide what we want to be. Outside the viewports, the quarantine field shimmered into existence around their solar system. Humanity was alone again, cut off from the galaxy they had terrorized. But for the first time since Earth's destruction, they were also free. Free to choose their own path forward. Free to remember what it meant to be human. Free to learn from their mistakes and build something better from the ashes of their vengeance. The war was over. The killing had stopped. And, in the silence that followed, Perhaps there was room for something new to grow. Something that remembered compassion as well as strength. Something that could fight monsters without becoming them. Something truly human. 50 years later, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the Memorial Garden on New Geneva Station, watching children play among the quantum roses. The flowers existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their petals shifting through colors that had no names in human language. They were beautiful and impossible, remnants of humanity's brief time as gods of war. Chun was old now. Actually old, not the artificial youth that genetic modification could provide. She had chosen to age naturally, to feel time's passage in her bones, and see mortality's approach in her mirror. After decades of existing beyond normal human limits, she found comfort in the constraints of biology. The children playing in the garden didn't know what she had been. To them, she was just another elderly woman who visited the memorial every Tuesday to lay flowers beneath the black stone walls where 10 billion names were carved in letters too small to read with unaugmented eyes. Grandmother Chun? A small voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Marcus Kim, age 7, holding a quantum rose that flickered between existence and possibility. Why are there so many names on the wall? Chun knelt down to the boy's level, her joints protesting the movement. Marcus was the great-grandson of her former tactical officer, though several generations of genetic drift separated him from Lieutenant Park's cybernetic legacy. His eyes were purely human, his thoughts unaugmented by quantum processing arrays. Those are the names of people who died a long time ago, she said gently. People who couldn't protect themselves from something very terrible. Why couldn't they protect themselves? Chun considered her answer carefully. The truth was complicated, stained with nuances that a child couldn't understand. But she had promised herself that if the young ever asked, she would give them honesty rather than comfortable lies. Because the people who killed them were stronger, she said. And sometimes, being strong makes you think you have the right to hurt people who are weak. Marcus frowned, his 7-year-old mind wrestling with concepts too large for his experience. That doesn't sound right. It isn't right, Chun agreed. But it happened anyway. And the people who survived had to decide what to do about it. What did they do? Chun looked up at the memorial wall, at the names that stretched from floor to ceiling in neat, precise rows. Earth's children, memorialized in quantum-etched stone that would last until entropy finally claimed the universe. 10 billion individuals, each one unique, each one lost forever. They became monsters to fight monsters, she said quietly. They forgot that being strong doesn't give you the right to hurt people, even people who hurt you first. Marcus tilted his head, the way children do when adults say things that don't make sense. But if someone hurts you, don't you have to hurt them back? Do you? Chun asked. What do you think? The boy considered this with the gravity that children bring to important questions. I think if you hurt people who hurt you, then everybody just keeps hurting each other forever. That's very wise, Chun said, meaning it. It took us a long time to learn that lesson. She stood slowly, her back protesting the movement. Around them, the memorial garden hummed with quiet activity. Families visiting lost relatives. Students researching historical projects. Tourists from the outer colonies learning about humanity's darkest period. The quarantine had been lifted 20 years ago, after the cosmic hierarchy determined that humanity had sufficiently recovered from its temporary insanity. Now humans lived among the stars again, but they did so differently than before. The species had learned caution. They had learned the price of unchecked power and the seductive danger of righteous fury. Most importantly, they had learned that being the victim of a great crime didn't automatically make you the hero of your own story. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached through the garden paths, moving carefully with the aid of a walking stick carved from Terran oak. Like Chun, she had chosen to age naturally, to reclaim her humanity one gray hair at a time. Her transformation back from genocidal goddess to merely human had been difficult, marked by decades of therapy and careful reconstruction of her moral compass. The council meeting is starting, Vasquez said. They want our final recommendations on the Kethrin situation. Chun nodded, taking one last look at the memorial wall. The Kethrin were a young species recently discovered beyond the galactic rim. They had achieved spaceflight only 50 years ago, but they had already begun enslaving their neighboring systems. Their methods were disturbingly familiar. Overwhelming technological superiority backed by casual brutality toward perceived inferiors. The galactic community was debating how to respond. Some advocated for immediate military intervention. Others preferred diplomatic engagement. A few suggested leaving the Kethran alone to work out their own destiny, regardless of how many species they enslaved in the process. As one of the few surviving veterans of humanity's war against the Zelkari, Chin's opinion carried significant weight. The Council wanted to know, what should civilized species do when confronted with genocidal expansionism? She had spent months considering the question, wrestling with the ghosts of her own choices. The answer she had reached was complex, unsatisfying, and absolutely necessary. "Tell them we recommend graduated intervention," she said as they walked toward the council chambers. "Economic sanctions first. Diplomatic isolation. Cultural quarantine. If those fail, then limited military action designed to contain their expansion without destroying their civilization." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Not exactly the decisive action some council members are hoping for." "Decisive action is what got us quarantined for 30 years, Chen replied. "Sometimes the right choice is the slow choice. The careful choice. The choice that leaves room for redemption." They entered the council chambers, where representatives from 47 species had gathered to debate the Kethran question. The chamber itself was a marvel of post-war architecture, designed to prevent any single species from dominating the proceedings. Gravity varied by section to accommodate different physiologies. The translation systems had been upgraded to convey not just words, but emotional context. Even the seating arrangements had been carefully calculated to minimize historical tensions. Chen took her place at the witness podium, facing an audience that included some of the galaxy's most powerful political figures. Many of them remembered the Zelkari War. Some had been alive when humanity's fleets appeared like nightmares from parallel dimensions to systematically erase an entire civilization. "Admiral Chun," said Speaker Vordhak of the Crystal Collective, her translated voice chiming like distant bells. "The Council has reviewed your written recommendations regarding the Kethran expansion. Some members question whether humanity has the moral authority to advise on this matter, given your species' own history." Chen had expected this. Humanity's return to galactic society had been gradual, marked by suspicion and carefully monitored interactions. The quarantine had ended, but the reputation remained. Humans were the species that had chosen genocide as a solution to their problems. Their advice on dealing with aggressive expansionism carried the weight of terrible experience. "You're right to question our moral authority," Chen replied. "We made choices during the war that violated every principle of civilized behavior. We became the monsters we fought against. But that's exactly why our perspective matters." She gestured toward the holographic display showing the Kethran expansion zone. 3-star systems already under their control, with clear preparations for further conquest. "We know what it feels like to lose everything. We know the rage that comes with helplessness. We know how easy it is to justify atrocities when you wrap them in the language of justice." She paused, meeting the gaze of representatives from species that had once feared humanity's return to the galaxy. "We also know the cost of choosing vengeance over wisdom." Speaker Mordex of the aquatic reaches raised one of his scaled appendages. "You advocate for restraint, but the Kethran are enslaving civilian populations. How many innocents must die while we attempt diplomatic solutions?" It was the central question, the one that haunted every discussion of intervention ethics. How do you balance immediate harm against long-term consequences? When does the duty to protect innocent life outweigh the principles of self-determination and cultural autonomy? "Every species develops differently," Chen replied. "The Kethran are young, aggressive, convinced of their own superiority. That doesn't necessarily make them irredeemable. With proper containment and cultural guidance, they might evolve past their expansionist phase." "And if they don't?" pressed Speaker Mordex. "If diplomatic engagement fails? If they continue enslaving their neighbors while we debate ethics?" Chen felt the weight of 10 billion ghosts on her shoulders. The easy answer was overwhelming force. Humanity had proven that genocidal empires could be stopped permanently. But the cost of that solution had been humanity's own soul. "Then, we use force," she said finally. "But targeted force. Surgical strikes against their military capabilities. Economic isolation. Technology restrictions. We contain their expansion without destroying their civilization. We give them room to choose a better path while preventing them from harming others. That's a very nuanced approach, observed Speaker Vorthack. Some might say it's insufficiently decisive. Chen smiled grimly. Decisive action led us to exterminate an entire species for crimes committed by their government. 800 billion individuals erased from existence because their leaders chose genocide as entertainment. That kind of decisiveness is a luxury civilized species can't afford. The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing various approaches to the Catherine question. Some favored immediate military intervention. Others supported complete non-interference. A few suggested cultural infiltration and gradual reformation. But Chen's words had clearly affected the assembly. The experiences of humanity's war, both the justification for it and the horror of its execution, provided a unique perspective on the dangers of unchecked aggression. The galaxy had seen what happened when victims became perpetrators, when justified anger transformed into systematic atrocity. In the end, the Council voted for graduated intervention. Economic sanctions would begin immediately. Diplomatic isolation would follow if the Catherine refused to negotiate. Military containment was authorized as a last resort, but with strict limitations on scope and methodology. It wasn't a perfect solution. Some species would continue to suffer under Catherine oppression while diplomatic pressure slowly built. But it was a solution that preserved the possibility of redemption, both for the Catherine and for the galactic community that had to decide how to deal with them. That evening, Chen returned to her quarters on New Geneva Station, a modest apartment with a view of the Memorial Garden. The quantum roses were glowing softly in the artificial twilight, their impossible colors shifting through spectra that existed only in parallel dimensions. She poured herself a glass of wine, real wine, from grapes grown in actual soil under natural starlight, and activated her personal communications array. The holographic display flickered to life, showing her messages from across human space. Most were routine administrative matters. Budget requests for memorial maintenance, invitations to speak at universities, reports from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission still documenting the full extent of humanity's wartime activities. But one message was different. It came from the outer colonies, where humans had built new worlds in the wake of Earth's destruction. The sender was identified as Rebecca Martinez Chen, age 47, Chen's daughter, the one she had thought died in California during the first wave of Zelkari bombardment. The message was brief. Mother, I know it's been 50 years. I know you thought I was dead, but I survived the evacuation, lived in the refugee colonies during the war. I understand why you made the choices you did. But I'm ready to talk now if you are. Chen stared at the message for a long time, wine forgotten in her hands. She had grieved for Rebecca decades ago, had carried her daughter's memory through the dark years of transformation and vengeance. The possibility that she had survived, that she had been alive all this time. She activated the response system with shaking hands. Rebecca, she said to the recording interface. Ah yes, I'm ready to talk. I've been ready for 50 years. Later that night, Chen walked through the Memorial Garden one final time. The quantum roses whispered in the artificial breeze, their petals existing in states that normal physics couldn't explain. They were beautiful remnants of humanity's brief time as cosmic forces, preserved now as reminders rather than weapons. She stopped before the memorial wall, running her fingers across names carved in letters too small to read without enhancement. 10 billion people who had died because their government chose defiance over surrender. 10 billion people whose deaths had launched humanity on a path toward becoming something monstrous. But also 10 billion people whose memory had eventually called humanity back from the brink of permanent transformation. The dead had no voice, but their silence had spoken louder than any argument for returning to civilization. I think we're finally becoming human again, she said to the wall of names. Not the humans we were before, that innocence is gone forever, but maybe we can become the humans we should have been. The ones who remember that being strong doesn't give you the right to destroy the weak. A gentle chime from her communications device told her that Rebecca was trying to establish contact. After 50 years of believing her daughter was dead, Chen would soon hear her voice again. The conversation would be difficult, marked by decades of separation and choices that couldn't be undone. But it would also be human, complicated and painful and beautiful in the way that only human relationships could be. Chun activated the communication, and her daughter's face appeared in the holographic display. Older now, marked by her own scars from the war years, but unmistakably the child Chun had lost a lifetime ago. "Hello, Mother," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the weight of years and forgiveness and hope. "Hello, sweetheart," Chun replied, tears running down her weathered cheeks. "Welcome home." Outside, the memorial garden hummed with gentle life. The quantum roses bloomed in impossible colors, their beauty unmarred by the darkness they represented. And somewhere in the vast network of galactic civilization, the Kethran Empire continued its expansion, unaware that its fate was being decided by species who had learned the hard way that there were worse things than defeat. Sometimes the price of winning was becoming something you couldn't recognize in the mirror. Sometimes the hardest victory was choosing to remain human. And sometimes, in the space between justice and vengeance,